We get it started right here. Started?
Yep.
Okay. You guys, we got basically, you came to this differential. It was all totally taken apart. We didn't take it apart. These fine young men did. Everybody know what this is? What would Toyota call this?
Carrier.
Almost. Carrier tends to be all in this. This tends to be the carrier. This I would call the case, according to Toyota. Some manufacturers would call this like the center section, and they would call this the case. It gets very confusing, but for now we're going to call this the case because it's the Toyota way. First thing I want to point out is this case could have some issues. See this flat surface right here? If this was warped, and then we put this ring gear on it, what do you think the ring gear would have? There's a term there. Run out, exactly. Run out could come from the ring gear, or run out could come from the case. If it's brake rotors, this becomes the hub, remember that? And this becomes the rotor. So it could be the rotor that's warped, but it could also be that the rotor is sitting on a hub that has some damage. Remember they talk a lot about corrosion on the hub, these types of things. So we're gonna look at this. Now here's an ASE question for you right off the bat. If you were to measure with your dial indicator, which I'll grab for a quick second, okay, and I'm gonna be gentle with it. But if you were to measure run out like this and spin this and you were to have run out, what do you think you would do to fix that? Get a new one. Not machine it, not file it, not shim it, none of that stuff. If this has run out, it's trash. Okay, that's ASE thing. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start putting this together. We can't put the ring gear on first because the ring gear typically blocks this pin. Anybody can guess the name of this? We'll call it something specific.
Pinion.
Pinion shaft. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Pinion shaft. Very good. The pinion shaft is going to go through and hold these pinion gears. You may call the spider gear, but you'll notice they have a little shim right here. This and this are going to go together like this, and this shim that I was talking about is going to control this amount of backlash right there. So if these have too much backlash like this, you hear that? Then we could actually do a bigger shim, and that would drop this gear lower and tighten up the backlash for us. So there's a couple measurements that need to be done there that are on the ASE all the time. So I think what I'll do is probably slide these side gears in. And now if we take this apart, we want to put these exactly where they came from. The side gears also have shims. I think if I put the side gears in, and then I'm going to try to walk in these pinion gears. You could call them spider gears, but they're really pinion gears, but it's a bit of a puzzle to do this. So I'm especially going to be struggling here because I'm going to be doing it so you can see more so than I can see, but I'll do my best. We got to like kind of walk them in. All right, come on, baby. Come on. Come on, little sweetie. Otherwise, I'm going to volunteer you, and then you'll come over here and you'll look dumb. Yeah, that's going to be tough. Okay. We got to get them so they'll spin. I'll tell you what, I'm going to walk these in to save video time. Edward, go ahead and pause for me. Okay, so as we get them pretty close, we should be fairly close right now. Then this pinion shaft is ultimately what's going to lock those in, but I need to make sure that this hole goes along with that hole. See that shim slid out of there? Okay, we can slide it back in. But whenever this pin is out, you're at a very delicate point. Kind of makes sense? Oh, it's got to go in from the other side, like this. Okay, right there. Right there. Now remember, this is what type of differential? It has nothing in the middle. Remember that? It's kind of open. That's what you said, opens, right? So if it was a limited slip, we'd have other things to deal with here. So this is not really intended to be like, oh, this is exactly how you do the diff. This is an easy one. Okay, then right here, if you look, this pinion shaft has to be secured right here. There could be a bolt, there could be, in this case, it's a pin, but like it's really common on the diff. It's really common on domestic differentials that it's a bolt right here, and it's like a 5/16 or an 8 millimeter, and they come with Loctite. You really need to Loctite those. So if you see somebody with a wrench right here, they're getting out this bolt. Okay, but on Toyota, a lot of times we'll use a pin, and it does look like, which way is it gonna go? Is it this one? That one? Looks like it's about the right length. Oh, it is the smaller one. Indeed it is. Which way did you guys drive it out? This side or that side? Do you remember? Drove it out whichever way it came out. Okay. All right, so if I've got it right there, okay, that one's driven in. Cool. So now what I've got is the side gears here and the pinion gear here. Those should be in. What's the backlash? Don't know. We need to check that. That's why, Edward, you're pretty close by me, because we're gonna set up for a measurement here. So I'm gonna clip the dial indicator to the case. And then I gotta stretch this around, kind of rig it up here. And we're gonna put it on any tooth. It doesn't really matter what tooth. We're gonna try to put it as close to a 90 as we can. Let's see, something like about that right there, about this right here. Okay, now when I do this, what I have to do is, if you turn it a lot, you guys can see, you could make it move a lot, but I'm turning all the side gear and the pinion gear. So what I need to do is really just hold the pinion. I just need to move the side gear, just the backlash, so I can just measure the backlash movement. And actually, I don't really feel any. This has no backlash at all. You think that's good or bad? We should always have some backlash. If there's no backlash, those gears are already pressed against each other. What happens when they get hotter? They're gonna be pushing more and more, right? So there's actually an issue here. What do you think we would do to fix that? You know what? Now that I've moved it just a bit, I think I did. I just found the backlash. There we go. Zoom in really well here and watch. I'm holding this one steady. If you guys have a good ear, you could hear them. Right there. Now what was it though? I can't exactly tell. You could tell it's probably pretty close to 10, but to really check, we'll go ahead and we'll zero this. I didn't realize it was quite that tight, so I did move it, unfortunately. It's at about 9.
You can hear it.
You can see it straighter than me, about 9 or 10 thousandths. Okay, I actually don't remember the spec, but let's do a thing right here. You see my hands? Look at these hands right here. If this right here is 10 and we wanted 5, how would we tighten them up? Yeah, add a shim, and that's gonna make a mesh deeper, right? The tooth it's tapered, it gets deeper. So this would be like 5. Or let's say that this is what we have right now and it's 2, but we want 10. Thinner shim, right? Because behind that gear, we could have a thinner shim, and that's gonna let them remove a little bit and be out more towards like the crown of the tooth. Remember those parts of the teeth? So if we look at the teeth, remember the crown is up here, the crown at the top, the root's down in the bottom, the root's where it's thickest. Cool? So if you measure one, you've measured all. The only thing is, let's say you have gears that are worn a little bit different. If the teeth are worn at, let's say, if it's the clock, right? If the teeth are worn at 12, they might be kind of fresh at 6. So it might actually be good to pull this off, spin it a bit, and measure a different tooth, right? So like measure it in several different points is gonna be a standard procedure, and that's because you don't know if the gear is worn exactly the same. And so I would go ahead and spin it, move it to a different spot, measure it a few different spots. Cool? Make sense? Okay, so now I'm just gonna set that here. This one is basically set. Now the next step is gonna be the ring gear. So the guys who pulled this ring gear off, you found sometimes these are sort of like press fit, and sometimes they're like not exactly press fit, but they're all gonna be fitting pretty tight. So there are cases where you actually have to put this in the oven, and that's why we have an oven in the lab. In case you ever wondered, there's an oven over there. That's the reason. Okay, when we go to get this in, and by the way, I'm gonna make a note. We should have match marked this. If I don't see a match mark, that's okay. Just in case, you know, there was some difference. You know, it's like a rotor. If you pop a rotor off, technically the book standard would be to match mark it. So you guys will know. Oh, does this have a pin in it too? It's kind of interesting. Let me try to knock that back out. Because it's not press fit, but it's almost press fit, so I didn't get the bolt holes lined up, and I actually squeezed it just a bit too much. I don't remember this, do you?
No, I found that.
Okay. Okay, so when we go to do these bolts, I'm going to get them ready by just setting a few in these little struts. And then let's say I'm going to go for this one. I'm going to line these up as I bring it up, because once you get it kind of in place, you can't really spin it anymore. It's almost press fit, but not quite. Okay, so once I get one started, then I'll be pretty happy with it. Okay, if that one's mostly started, I'll just make sure I can get a couple more started. Cool. The main purpose of these is actually because they're locking. So when you tighten these up, they have a little wing that you can fold up onto the bolt so they can't loosen up. It's its main deal. See, like these ones, little tough to get. Okay, but if it's started, I know it'll close up. Cool. There we go. Now it's sitting well. Okay, so for this one, there is a whole torque sequence, but what we're gonna do, I'm actually gonna have to pop one of those back off. What we're gonna do is the overall, which is star pattern, okay? If you look in service manual, it will probably literally give you an exact sequence. Was it missing a bolt? Or am I just missing? Oh, there it is. No, I just misplaced it. That's my fault. Okay, so we'll get it over here. All right, so star pattern, I think you guys you can understand that, right? And also make sure you really start these, because it's really easy to mess up the ring gear. Okay. Okay, like this one's still a little tight. It's okay. Okay. Okay, yes. I'm gonna go a little more on those. Star. Go into the star pattern, star pattern, star pattern, star pattern, star pattern, star pattern. Is there a sequence? There definitely is an exact sequence. But is that the overall? Yes. Why do you think we did the star pattern really specifically for this ring gear?
So you can see properly.
It's got to. So if you were to draw it up on one side and have it kind of wedged, what do you think would happen? That'd be kind of like run out. Yeah. So then you'd have basically like a warped rotor type of thing. Now, before we were to get too crazy right here, we'd actually want to torque this to spec, but because this is an overall, the theory, more so than the exact how to do it on this one, we're going to roll it. We torque it to spec, and we fold up these little clips, and that would lock these bolts in. So we're going to roll it like that. And then, basically, this one's ready. So there you go. There's your ring gear and your case. Many would call the center section. Next thing we want to point out is here's your pinion. Here's your pinion nut. This is that one that I sent you that thing, that tiki-taki. That tiki-taki was like, here's how you do a pinion seal. The pinion seal lives right here. To change that pinion seal, this pinion goes inside, and then you have this companion flange right there. The seal's right behind the flange. So do you have to pull the flange to get the seal? Yes. So you're like, oh, there's a nut. This nut holds the flange on. Well, yeah, the nut holds the flange on, that's true. But what the nut also does, when we tighten this up, there's gonna be a set of bearings on there, right? So pop this back off. You're gonna have this bearing and this bearing, and you see they're facing each other right here. That is, and I'm not gonna drive it too much, but the closeness of this bearings, that is your pinion preload. That's your pinion bearing preload, okay? So when you thread this nut on, like this, the tighter you tighten that nut, the more this crush sleeve in between here, this collapsible spacer, gets crushed. These bearings get closer and closer together. Those bearings are riding on races. See, here's the race for that outer bearing, and then here's the race for that inner bearing. If you're actually doing a differential repair, we're gonna take our chisel and we're gonna drive those races out. If you change a bearing, you change a race. Now you're gonna notice a trend with me. I'm gonna keep telling you the same things. This bearing is married to this race. So you don't just get to, you don't do the old switcheroo and now you have a new race on an old bearing. Makes sense? They've grown together. Okay, so if we were to do this for real, drive those couple races out, drive the new races in, we'd use a race driver and you'd seat them. A lot of times it's really nice to have some brass stuff. Why do you think brass? What about brass race or bearing drivers?
It's soft.
Exactly, so the brass wouldn't mark up any of these bearings, any of these races, but they do make metal ones that fit them just perfect, so you could use metal too. All right, with that being said, you guys can get an overall understanding of what's going on here real quick. I think the logical thing to do is gonna be to put this up in the vise, but I'm probably gonna do it this way so you can mostly see. Cool? So I'm gonna put this up in the vise, snug it. Now, visual, your pinion is gonna go in here like this. Cool? So that means when they did that job, right, they pulled the nut, they pulled the companion flange, and this was all inserted already, and they did the seal right there, and that you can do that. But then you notice they saw this bearing, and they were like, remember they were wiggling this, and they're like, oh, see, this is loose. Well, this is gonna be loose when this bearing is just floating here. This pinion is only gonna be working properly when we have the correct amount of preload on these bearings, okay? So they did something incorrect. They checked it when this flange was off and this nut was off. So that was, yeah, it was loose, that's normal. That wasn't because the bearing was bad, okay? When we go to reassemble this, here we go. This is the outer bearing. I'm gonna put it over here. This is one-time use. You guys remember what this is? Crush sleeve, collapsible spacer, same thing, different terms. This is another bearing that would be changed. If you wanted to change this bearing, we'd get the gear splitter on here, like that. In fact, we got a gear splitter pretty close by. Probably too small, but this will give you the idea. We get this gear splitter on here, put this underneath the bearing, snug it up, press it, and this bearing is actually gonna come right off, okay? Underneath that bearing, you know what lives down there? You guys wanna do a bearing? We could do a bearing. Would that be fun? All right, we'll take it over the press. Edward, pause for a sec. Safe, huh? You ready? We're going. Okay, when I go to get this pinion in here, well, I might be able to sneak it from the top, but instead I'm gonna bring it in from the bottom because that pinion's kind of big. And I gotta get it where it'll come all the way up. And then, ooh, I can't use this bearing splitter this way. I guess I gotta flip it this way. Okay, here you go. Now what I'm trying to do is get this tucked right under there. Okay. So you guys can see, right? You see how I've got the bearing splitter tucked under the bearing? Cool? All right, now what I should do is tighten these up. You guys in the back can see? Not really. Good. Oh, did you pull one?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's good. You should. I mean, to really do the job, you got to go through all the steps. If you're just going to do a basic disassembly, reassembly, you can get away without doing this, but the reason sometimes I shy away from this is there will be bearing casualties. There's just, these bearings are not really made to be pulled and pressed back on, but we will. Okay, so now how I've got it should be pretty close. Let me point something out. If you do it like this, what's wrong there? Well, if you look, you're pressing between the plates and you're putting all the strain on the bolts, and those aren't that strong, so it's better to do it this way. So when we go to do it like this, on this press, we're gonna do presses on, low pressure is gonna make it move fast. So ready? That's fast. If we turn low pressure off, this gives you a lot more power, but it's slow, right? So I'm gonna keep the low pressure on. And we might be able to do this in one shot, and sometimes I'll put a little something up there. We'll see right now. Okay. Yeah, I think we're gonna make it. I'm just gonna have it touch the pinion. Okay, now right now I wanna double check, recheck everything, and I wanna point some out to you. See up here this pressure? Edward, that includes you. See that guy? We're at 0. Let me start the press. You'll notice I really didn't build anything. When that number is going up, that means you're building tons of force. That's when you should be a little scared. It's normal, you know, and the safety glasses will save your eyes, but it won't save your head. So wear the face shield and then you're really safe, huh? It's like basically the airbags of safety, of PPE. So when you're doing this, you can always glance up at that gauge and see, are we making excess pressure? But as I'm doing this, I want to point out, we're supporting the bearing the best we can and we're pressing the pinion out, which means, watch this, in a couple more pumps it'll be loose. And then look where it's going to land, safely in a towel box. Unfortunately though, I'm just about maxed out on the press, so we might get it. I think we might maybe get it. No, we're done. Okay, but that's all right. I'll show you what I would do, which is maybe not exactly what I have you do. It's okay. It's all right. We already got this thing on the run. It's not going to get away from us. Don't even worry about it. Okay. I mean, right now we could probably hammer that out. What I'm going to do to make it even a little nicer is I'm going to catch it right on the bottom. So we're right there. So if you all want to do a re-gear, you need a new pinion, but this is the reason you may have to do this. See this? This shim right here. This sets our pinion depth. This shim is generally what you're going to need to do your re-gear, because this shim essentially correlates with the case, with the housing, both the housing and the case really. So this shim should be perfect to put on our new pinion. But again, it goes here, which is over top of the bearing. See that? That's kind of the issue. So when we go to pull it out, we got to pull the bearing. Now when we go to press this bearing on, I want to point something out. This is the inner race in here. Then this is the cage and the rollers. If you hit the cage, this bearing's puked. You got to press right on the inner race, because the inner race is what's being pressed onto the pinion shaft. You don't ever want to press the force through the bearing. So now you just got to rig something up for that. You loosen this up all the way, release it. So to do that, we get to pick something different, like this one, too small. If you look, see, you can't have something that's going to get stuck on the pinion. This one, possibly too small. Yeah, just a little bit too small. Essentially what we're looking for is like a pipe. This one, see this? Could that work?
No.
No, because it needs to be on the inner race. All right, that's the key. This one's too big. This one, also too big. All right, so we're chasing something, but we're gonna get it. Nice. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Like a glove, okay? Now when we go to do this, did somebody just make fun of me whistling? Okay, when we go to do this, we're gonna press this down, and we're always gonna be very mindful that if this thing starts to feel weird, it might be a little too tight, but if it feels good, I think this is gonna be just what we want. Okay, and I'm still on low pressure. This shouldn't take all that much. You see it pressing it on there? Just for the heck of it, I'm gonna loosen it. Look, see, that's loose, so that's good. If you press something and it doesn't fit, you may never get it off again, and then you look really dumb. Ooh, something definitely hit right there, though. I think it's okay. I think I was just scared. Okay. Oh, I see exactly what hit. Yeah, yes it is, isn't it? Okay, so let me think of a way to deal with that. This is perfect, except it's a little short. You guys see the issue?
Yeah, that's it.
The press hit the pinion right there. Okay, so I'm gonna think of how I want to do this. And had I planned this a little bit better, I would have probably found a longer one of these, but being that you guys are here to learn, and this is really a theory video. I'm gonna do it how I'm gonna do it right here. But I think I hit again. Okay, you can see, no, I should be able to go more than that. Yeah, that thing should have the depth. I think we can do this. But look, now I'm into the bigger part of the pinion, and so this one's starting to get stuck. So this is not gonna work. I'm gonna have to find a different one. Let's pause and let me. All right, so it's actually the same tool, but it was kind of mushroomed and we filed it. So it's gonna be tight, but I think we'll make it. And I'm not looking to make this run all day. So we're gonna knock it out here. But you guys, the lesson right there would be, if it feels like it's binding up, just stop and check it. Because if you press it too far, you'll never get it back out.
Oh, okay. It works now.
Okay, but let me check it. Yeah, it's perfect. See how this is loose?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Now, how do you think it got mushroomed? Hammer.
Sending it.
Hammer. Somebody was using the swing press rather than just the press. Okay, so there you go. I just set it. How hard do you think I should push down?
As hard as you can.
Okay, because what I could do, I could try to build some pressure. I could turn the low pressure off. See up here?
Yes.
I could turn low pressure off, and that'll make it easier to pump and build pressure. You see how the pressure's building? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's because it's there. You're not going to send it any further. There's no reason to even have done that. But I wanted to just show you what the press could do. Okay, so now this bearing, this is the pinion bearing. We would never press the old one back on. We'd press a new one. Okay, but now the new bearing is on with the old shim. Make sense?
Yes.
You all know how to do that pinion shim now.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to pull the bearing off. Now pause and we'll go back over the dip. All right, so now that this has got the bearing pressed on with the original pinion shim, right? We're ready to, okay. But actually I might as well put the collapsible spacer in. Here we go. So you see what's happening on this side. Now I'm gonna flip it so you can see what's happening on this side. Easy, baby. Okay, we got that in there. The outer pinion bearing. And of course we'd have the new races driven in. That's simple enough. I think you could figure that out. Right here, it could get a little tricky because we usually like to set this in a bit. And then we would drive our pinion, we would install our pinion seal. Remember that video it showed driving the pinion seal? I didn't really have a huge issue with how they tap it in a circle. That's pretty common. It was more just when they put this in, they really were not paying a whole lot of attention to how they were driving this nut in. It was just basically running with the gun. Okay, so right here you got a few options. One, sometimes I'll just hold the pinion on the backside. Just try to tap that in a bit. You might not want to use your hands though, now that I think about that. You should probably use some kind of a mallet or something. Then we're going to get this nut and start it. And of course, remember it would have the new pinion seal in there now, which is one of the main reasons you guys would even be doing this. You probably all will never rebuild a diff unless you're doing something for fun or unless they come up with some crazy recall. But you probably will replace a pinion seal. So what I'm about to do right now is the main focus of how you do a pinion seal. Right now I want to show you something. See how easy this spins? What do you think the preload is right there? Zip nothing. Yeah. So turning the bearing may take like an inch pound or something, but there's no actual preload on the bearings. You know how I also know? Look at this. See, this thing is loose. Inside, that pinion is going to be moving all over the place. These bearings are sloppy. So this is not, you're never going to get a good contact pattern because this thing's moving all over. Okay, so we know it needs to get tighter. How much tighter? That's tough to say. Now I'm going to break this one out, which is actually kind of overkill, but it'll work. And I'm just going to hold this by hand for right now. And I'm going to try to tighten it up. Okay, this is kind of ridiculous. Abdul, will you grab me a breaker bar that's not so intimidating?
Where from?
The regular toolbox. Okay, so as we go to do that, I want to point something out that you definitely don't want to do. Right now, this is fine. What you definitely don't want to do is be like, oh yeah, let me get the new tool, inch-pound torque wrench. Okay, and let's tighten this up to at least 100 foot-pounds. Do not, please do not. You'll notice there's one in there, and this little 1/4 inch anvil is sheared right clean off. It's off all the way, gone. No. No. Bad dog. Thank you. This will do. All right, so right here is about as snugged up as I can get it, but you notice I'm struggling to hold this flange from spinning. I need another tool, and watch. That's still way too low. You can get the inch-pound torque wrench on there, and it's just going to read 0. This is the next tool. companion flange holding tool. Okay, so here we go. Set here, pop in, go here. Now how tight should I make it right now? I mean, that's kind of the thing. You have to understand this. Every amount that I tighten it, I'm adding pinion bearing preload, okay? So let's just say I go about that much. And I take this off. Ooh, that sucker is tight already. But it's got some preload. I don't know how much. It can be a little bit normal for it to be kind of stuck, you know, especially with the old bearing. Makes sense, and especially because the bearing's not really well oiled. Andres, go ahead. I'm gonna come back to that. What I would do is mark it. Nowhere in service information you're gonna read to mark it, okay? So I'm gonna explain. Here we go, you ready? I'm gonna turn this, and while I do this, I'm gonna not really try to drag this socket. Because I'm adding preload if I'm holding this tight, I'm just gonna make it so the wrench doesn't fall off. And Edward, I want you to come over here and look at this gauge. See if you can get a good zoom in on that. What do you think that number is? It's about a 5. Ready? Okay, I'm gonna hold it still. I was showing about 5.
Yeah, it was above 5.
Okay, this would be 10. This would be 15. That would be 30. So as I'm turning this, I'm gonna give you a spec right now. We're shooting for 5 to 7. Okay, we're gonna make 5. Actually, that's probably a little too low. We're probably looking more like, let's make it 7 to 10. I didn't look this spec up, so we're gonna roll with it. Okay, we're gonna do about. It's usually right about around 7. I just don't remember if 7's on the high end or the low. We'll go with 5 to 7. Cool. 5 to 7 inch pounds of preload. Okay, so if we're on here and we're showing just about 5 right now, what do you think?
It's good.
We're good. Okay, then we're done. However, what if I said it was 7 to 10? Right now it's only, exactly, it's too loose. That means this is too easy, right? So if it calls for 7 to 10, we need to tighten this up. How do you want to tighten it up?
With the brake ball.
Oh, like with this?
No.
Exactly. No. Take this. You got to change back over to something that can handle the torque. Torque wrench, yes, no, it's up to you. They do say in the service manual that you at least need to give this a minimal torque. But the thing is, if you need more inch pounds of preload, you're going to have to torque it more, right? So remember, we were very close, right? So I just want to barely tweak it. Like just that much, okay? But I'm making it look easy, but actually this is fairly tight. Cool, and I can feel it. Maybe I'll go just a touch more, okay? Change this back over. So this is all about the bearing preload. What just happened right there when I tightened it some more? What did I just do? Yeah, see, we're high now. You know what? I'm a bad boy. You know what I just did? I overshot it. So right now we're getting about like a 12. And I was saying 7 to 10, right? You know what we need to do now? If you loosen it, now the bearings are not up against the crush washer, the collapsible spacer. So really that thing's kind of loose in there now. That's a no. I overshot it. You know what I need to do? Take it all back apart and get a new crush sleeve. I killed it. You believe it? I killed it. However, this is the news for you. This is how I'm going to redeem myself. That if you looked at that crush washer, it was already over crushed. The reason that these are really hard for us to set up is because you're not really able to use the crush sleeve because the crush sleeve is already over crushed. So when you don't have the crush sleeve, it's kind of hard. Like it's not a very gradual. It's like under and then it's over immediately. So I didn't put a new crush sleeve in there. Remember the collapsible spacer? I should have. But if right now I've overshot it, it needs a new collapsible spacer. Remember the guy I told you, he did it so tight it wouldn't move, and then he loosened it up, and then he shipped it. What happened next week? It came back all blown up because that pinion was loose at that point. It was able to move, okay? So I've overdone this one. with that being said, we're still going to continue, but I want to make sure you guys understand. I over torqued this one. I over crushed the crush sleeve. I'm done. I shot myself in the foot right there. Make sense? So sad. However, we came up with about 12 inch-pounds. So now I'm going to make some new specs just to prove my point. If this spec was 7 to 12 and I'm at 12, we're in now. Okay, I make my own specs today. So if it's 7 to 12 inch-pounds, we're in. Our next step is going to be, we need to put our center section in, and that means we need to have these bearings on. These bearings could actually be pressed on. I'm going to think about exactly how I want to proceed with that. You guys saw the press already. Let's pause and I'll press these in. All right, so now that we got the bearings pressed on, I wanted to point some out. These side bearings, you'd always want to do new ones. You don't really reuse these either. If you were to just pull this out to do some work, you could probably put it back in, but if you have a problem with these side bearings, you definitely need to change them. Now let's pause for a moment. So what I mean is, let's stop assembling for a moment, and I want to point something out. Because we're going to call this a 4-to-1 ratio. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's around there. These pinion bearings are going to turn 4 times the speed of those bearings. You guys understand? And that's why just in a road test, you can tell if it's pinion bearings or side bearings. These are more high pitched. These are whoop, whoop, and these are going to be a more right? Just because it's 4 times faster to 1 time. Make sense? These also will change with just like vehicle speed. The faster this center section is turning, the noise is going to get louder and louder and louder and louder. And same with this, but when you change your throttle angle, you're putting more or less torque on this drive shaft, and that's going to change the force on those bearings. Okay, make sense? That's mostly how you diagnose bearings on a diff. Now we get ready to load this one in. There's something that we have to be prepared to do. This one's actually amazing because we got the outer race right here, and that's going to ride on the bearing, you'd always replace that. This is an adjuster. So this is where these differentials are really advantageous, I'm just going to say, because we're not dealing with shims right now. If it was not this adjuster, we'd have to basically stack our shims in here the way they came out, right? So when you pop that case off, the shims fall down. You need to keep track of which shim goes where. If you had a 200,000 shim here and a 100,000 shim here, and you popped it off and then you switched them up, your backlash is going to be all sorts of jacked up, right? So most of the time it's going to be shims, kind of like how that Pinion shim was. But in this case, we got adjusters, which again, I can't stress enough how amazing these are. Jesse, will you check who's running that gun and maybe just shut that door for me? We don't want it to distract us too much. Okay, so I'm getting my stuff in order. Right, so this is going to be typically like that. I believe that's going to be the way that one goes, if I remember right. So I'm going to swing this up, and I'm going to have, maybe just to make this easy, one volunteer. Jonathan, you're hired. Come on up and hold this and be ready for me. Okay. Have this and this ready. Do you see how these have to sit together? Just be ready for that. Okay, and then your bolts are going to be these. So be ready for all that type of baloney. Okay, so here we go. I got to just hold those races. I'm going to get this up into position. Jonathan, come on over and pick a side. Okay, I got to get this one right where we want it. Okay. So try to take that. Edward, can you see? Come right behind me. You're going to take that adjuster. See how that adjuster's threaded? We got to make sure that threaded part is on the threads in the cap, but also on the threads in this carrier. Okay, so set it in there where you think it's engaged well. And we can fine tune it a little later. Is it stuck in there?
Yeah.
Pop it out. Unless you think it's in the right spot. And then see right here? You gotta set it in like this. And we just gotta make sure that it feels like it's in the threads. Like that actually feels pretty good. See how it's moving nice? Okay, go ahead and cap it. We'll do a team effort. Then when we do that cap, kind of use the bolts to line it up. All right, get those started. Same on that lower one. This is something that people mess up a lot because you won't have the threads all the way in the cap or into the carrier, and that adjuster won't move. And then you're like, what the heck, the adjuster won't move and whatever. It should move nice and free. Like right now, it's definitely struggling. We might have to wiggle it around a bit, but we'll get there. See, there you go. That feels pretty good. Okay. It's all right. You can keep snugging those up a bit. Just trying to make sure that adjuster moves. These adjusters also, unfortunately, they've been kind of messed up before, so we're working with stuff that's been apart and together many times. Maybe we didn't do a good enough demo to preserve the parts. Cool. Keep snugging them up. See, this one's moving decent, so I think we got it more or less on track. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Not a really big deal if you drop a race. Really big deal if you drop a race and something hits the inside, but the outside's not that big of a deal. Okay, so I'm gonna hold this one here. In fact, you hold this one in place. So we're gonna drop it again. Okay, and then check this out. This is that spacer, remember, and we gotta have that spacer engaging really well with those threads. And then this one, like this, you can let go now. Okay. Bolts tend to not want to start, huh? Okay. Doesn't look all that good. There we go. Yeah, let's grab that other bolt. Okay, that looks pretty nice. All right. And then again, the key here is we're going to get these snug, but we need to make sure that these adjusters will turn. So right now we're still really loose, but as we get tighter, we got to keep checking and checking and checking, okay? Alrighty. And then these will also have a torque. Everything has a torque spec, but you have to know the torque spec, and we're just really doing a demo. So we're going to get it a little snugged up. See if we can still move these. This one looks like it might be crooked. Try to turn that adjuster. You'll notice you probably can't. And we need a little wrench to adjust those. Check it. I'm going to grab the wrench. In fact, Edward, pause one more. Two tools. All right. These are actually made for these adjusters, but this is the point. I wanted to see how it was moving, and it looks like it's moving decent, but if I look at it, I kind of feel like it might be like a partial thread off. So I'm going to try to hold it really well and just snug this up lightly. And now that'll be the moment of truth. And yeah, it's moving. It's not moving great, but it is moving. So what I'll do, hey, did you feel that? It just freed up right there. Now it feels really good. All right, so with that adjuster moving well, that's good. I just got to do the same thing with the other one. The other one feels pretty nice. It looks like the bottom might be out a bit. Okay. Of course, this looks a lot easier when you guys are sitting there. When you do it, you'll see. You'll struggle, and that's fine. That's what you're here for. Okay, but yeah, this one I'm struggling to get straight for sure. You're also kind of fighting the bearings a bit. That looks better. But does it turn better? It does spin. Yeah, these ones are a little rough, but we can make them work. Let's see. If they're in really nice condition, it's definitely much easier. Okay, now we got a new situation. Okay, that sounded like that one popped in a good way. All right, remember how we had 12 inch-pounds, right? I need to see what we have now. So right now we're about to set total preload, but we also have to mind our backlash right now. So you already remember how this looks, right? So I'm just gonna do it from my side. All right, it's just barely above 12. So what's the side bearing preload right now?
Less than 1.
Exactly. So I want to make a formula, so I brought the paper out. Okay, remember this. Ready? You need to know pinion, and that's preload, right? Preload is just tightness. Plus, this is side bearing preload. That equals, what do you think it equals?
Total.
Total, exactly. So a lot of times what they'll give us is a spec for this one. This one we're gonna make 7 to 12, and we had 12. And then they'll say, give an additional 4 to 6. So if we have 12, what's an additional 4? Anybody know?
16.
So we're looking for about 16. What's 12 plus 6? 16 to 18 total. What's the side? You can't really measure the side. All you can do is measure the total, but you have to know the pinion first. So we're going to go ahead and we'll say right now we have just over 12. So we've added something, but I don't think it's really bearing preload. I just think it's taken a little more force to turn the assembly. All right, so if the preload is too light, how do we tighten it? How do we add preload? The bearings are too loose right now. Which, by the way, I could have guessed that. See how much movement there is?
You see actions on both sides.
True, but these don't have shims. So your heart's in the right place, I agree. But do you see how sloppy loose this is? At a minimum, I know we need to tighten these up, at least so it's not loose. All right, but which one should I tighten? I liked what Madi said. Both sides. Right now, we're not super worried about backlash. Right here, can you tell there's backlash?
Yeah.
We're gonna at least make sure there's some backlash. Right now, I'm gonna tighten this side. If I tighten this side only, it's gonna give us more backlash. Because I'm pushing the ring gear away from the pinion. The pinion's on the center line. So if I tighten this side, it's pushing the ring gear away. That's gonna open this up more and more. Make sense? Kind of, sort of. Now let's say I come over here, ready? And I'm gonna start to turn these. This one is pushing the ring gear toward the pinions. The pinion center line. If I'm pushing the ring gear this way, right, I'll make the teeth. Shing, shing. Right now they're like this. If I want them tighter, I'm gonna move them in, right? See that? That's gonna make less backlash. So you're kind of juggling backlash and preload right now. All I really wanna do is make sure I have some amount of backlash. If I bury this ring gear into the pinion so much, it's gonna give me a false reading of a lot of preload because the gears are clashing. Make sense? So just maintain some backlash, but I'm gonna go ahead and look if I move it. Actually, this is a term called established zero case end play. Right now, the case no longer has end play actually, so I might check my backlash actually. I mean my total preload. I might have improved it. You guys know what this looks like already, so I can just look myself. All right, I'm about 15. So I got a little something, right? What's my spec?
16.
16, so I need more. But I also need to factor this backlash. Hear that backlash? How much is that? I don't freaking know, but it's something. All right, so we're just gonna keep it like that. It's probably excessive actually. So if I wanna increase my preload still, how do I increase my preload? Could I do this side or this side? Both sides is fine. If we want to keep the backlash the same, we do both sides. As long as we have some backlash, we don't really have to be that specific, but I'm gonna go just a little more. Cool. I still have backlash. That's all I'm doing. I'm not measuring the backlash yet. I'm gonna go. You know, I'm almost to 16. I can go a little bit more, right? You see how I'm tightening this? Tightening, and I'm tightening. If you wanted to do really cool with two of them, you'd actually put one here, and put one here, and you could tighten them both at the same time. Is that cool? How do I tighten them both at the same time? Different directions. I could loosen them both at the same time too. This would be tighten, right? Look at this one clockwise, this one clockwise. Cool? It's definitely getting a little tighter, so I think I'm probably going to be in spec. And yes, I'm up probably, 17. All right, are you happy with that? What was our possibility? I have 17. I know I had 12 in Pinion preload, so now this is algebra, okay? Math class, you did learn something in math. You learned it in a weird way, but now we're gonna apply literal algebra. 12 plus x, which becomes side bearing preload, equals 17. Who can figure that out?
X equals 5.
X equals 5, you know that, right? If you were to just rough a number in there because you learned tons and tons of algebra, you'd say 5, substitute 5 in there. 12 plus 5 equals 17, yes, it checks out. So our side bearing preload is 5 inches. What's weird though, 5 inch-pounds is like, why is the side bearing so light and the pinion so much? Well, it's not exactly true. Remember, when we're turning the pinion, we have a lot of gear reduction right here. So it's actually gonna be probably, it's 5 as we measure it, but in reality, these bearings are probably just as tight as this bearing. Remember, because we got mechanical advantage here because of the 4-to-1 ratio or so. All right, now with that being said, listen here. What is that? You got back rash? It's all rashy in your back? Back rash. Right there. All right. How do we measure that? We're going to get this tool out. Okay, and this is a part that people really do struggle with, so I'm going to try to keep it simple, stupid as possible. I'm going to just attach to this carrier, loosen the snake. This one's pretty nice, so I got to actually loosen it a little bit more, really flex it. Now when I get it up against a tooth, I could do it a couple different ways. I'm gonna probably do it right side up so everybody can see it really well. I'm gonna get in here like this. I'm gonna snug it here like that. Then I'm gonna snug up the snakeroony. Okay, and then let's just set this. In fact, let me punch a little deeper so it's up on top. There's a 0. Okay, that's pretty perfect. You guys may not be able to see, but Edward, you can see pretty well, right? Yep. Zoom in on that baby. What are we getting there? Can you tell?
Let's see. It looks like about
12, 13.
13, yeah.
I'd say about 13. Yeah. I'd agree. Then you could zoom out so you can see the overall motion. What I'm doing here, make no mistake about it, I'm not trying really hard to move this. I'm basically holding the pinion. I'm just moving the ring gear, okay? If I push harder, I can get the whole thing to rotate. I don't want the whole thing to rotate. All I'm trying to do is measure the space between the gears. That's the backlash. We're gonna make up a spec right now, 5 to 7 thousandths of an inch. So remember, this is measuring in thousandths now. So we have 13, right? Is 13 good when the spec is 5 to 7? Okay, understand, everybody needs to understand. You got the ring gear, which, by the way, I have this set up backwards only because it's kind of hard to get the Toyota one on the vise because this gets a little bit close, right? So normally the ring gear's over here. Just FYI, it doesn't really matter, but we're gonna go for the concept here. If my ring gear is here and my pinion, my pinion is like this, and I have 13, but I want 7, how do I get it to be 7? I'll give you a clue. We can't move the pinion anymore. The pinion is set. We set that shim, it's done. The shim is done. So what should I do? Move it this way. Make sense? All right, so what should I do? I got the tools right here. Should I tighten this one or loosen it?
Probably tighten this.
I should tighten it. But if I tighten it, isn't gonna make my preload too high? We already have good preload. It's gonna mess my preload up.
You have to loosen that side and tighten this side.
How much?
But the same amount.
Exactly, by the same amount. Okay, so now you're ready. If I know I gotta tighten this side, I'm gonna put this wrench here. And then if I know I'm gonna loosen the other side, I'm gonna put the wrench here. And guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna loosen this one. So my right, your left is gonna go up like this, ready? And this one is gonna go up too. So I'm gonna move them both the same. They're a little tough to move. Okay, let's see what effect that has. See how I move them both? So did I mess up my preload? No, because I move them both together. So basically all I'm doing is I'm threading this one in, which is pushing the ring gear, and I'm backing this one out, which is allowing the ring gear. Make sense? Now here we go. What do I have? Still pretty high. Okay. Yeah, whoops, I moved it too much. I got down to about 11 from what I saw. So that means I got to go more. I'm actually going to swing this out of the way because I don't want to mess it up. But it seems like this is going to take a little more effort than, sometimes I can move them really clean both at the same time. If you only have one tool, you know what I could do? I can count the number of holes. Ready? So this is going to be like a 1. I'm going to move it again. We'll do like a 2. And then I'm going to back this one off at 2. See, so I'm counting the holes up against that line. 1, 2. In fact, I'm going to probably go for like about 4. 3, 4. Makes it easier if you loosen it first, by the way. Okay, let me look so I can see. 1, 2. All right, so I did 2, 4, and 2, so it's a total. Now let me just feel this. I think that's still gonna be too loose, but let's go ahead and take a peek. Nah, I'm definitely getting there. I'm gonna try to get it to the needles on top for you. You can see pretty well. Okay, look at right there. What did you think we had there? Piece of junk. Come on, sweetheart. Don't be mean to me. Oh, that needle's touching a bit. That's why it's a little hard to move. I'm still showing like 10. This one is pretty loose. Okay, so if that's true, let's go another 4, shall we? 1, 2, 3, 4 holes. Then 1, 2, 3, 4 holes. Let me just feel it. Definitely, can you hear the difference already? Definitely getting tighter. Okay, that looked like about 8 to me. You know what? That's what it is. This is that needle's hitting a little bit, so I'm gonna just try to snug this up, and I'm not gonna move that one anymore. Come on, sweetie. Uh-oh, I think I overshot it. No, I didn't. Edward, what do you think? 30?
30
to 36, 38?
37, 38.
So wait a minute. And my spec is 5 to 7, so now I'm at 8, right? So we're really close. Could you run this? Probably. What could we do to just do like a little bit tighter backlash? I'm just gonna maybe do one more hole. In fact, if you want it at 7, we'll go to 7. What do you think the symptoms are of excessive backlash? What do you think? You ever have a car, you put it in park or reverse and the drive shaft moves a lot? Yeah. The drive shaft moving a lot means that that pinion has to move a lot before it engages the ring gear, right? Because your brakes are braking the axle, which stops the ring gear. There'd be a lot of play in there. That would be a symptom of excessive backlash. Now look, right here. Notice this? Ooh, baby. There's like almost nothing. I overshot it right there. I should have went with 1 hole, and instead I was like, oh, I'll go 2, we'll tighten it up, remember? This has like 3 right here. All right, so now I'm too tight. Let's discuss too tight real quick. What does too tight mean? Pinion, ring gear, too tight. How do I fix that? Back it out, back it out. So I'm just gonna go 1 tooth, and we know we're gonna be good. So what do I do to do 1 tooth? Tighten this or loosen this? If I have too tight backlash, which way should it go? That way, exactly. So I'm gonna loosen this one. Cool. I'm gonna tighten this one. That's gonna push that ring gear away. Okay? Boom, just like that. Now let's just listen. A little bit's coming back in. Can you tell the difference just by sound? Okay, if I set this up here, lock it in. Which is a little bit of a pain. This dial indicator is fighting me a bit, and it looked pretty good too. It's just been a little challenging. Come on, sweetie. Don't be like that. Let me check this. Feels okay. Okay. Going right here. Okay, there we go. All right, let's get this to 0. Edward, you can see that 7 right there?
Yep.
Nice. Okay, so there's your 7. Now let's pause for a moment. Now that you understand, okay, first off, let me flip this over because now that we're not having to move it so much, I actually want to get it in the right direction. And this thing was really upside down. So this is the way it goes, but it tends to hit the ring gear, although it looks like we got some room. All right, so everything we just did was kind of upside down. That's okay. Now I want to discuss something. Now that you guys know kind of the difference between preload and backlash, let's change this over to shims, okay? I'm gonna write down some shim numbers, and we're gonna make this thing what we want it. I'm gonna put, remember in this style, they don't have adjusters that you can turn. Okay, most of the time we're dealing with shims. So we're gonna go with a 100 and a 100. That'd be amazing. Would you agree? If I just had to put shims in like this, the first shim would slide in, but when I actually go to slide the second shim in, it's very normal for us to have to use a chisel or like a punch or a drift and drive it in. If it slides right in, what's that tell me? It's too loose. Give me that more in differential terms. Yeah, but give me it in terms. Like we just talked about 2 important terms. It's not backlash. Preload. The preload of the bearings on the side were these 2 bearings. Preloading it means squeezing them like this. If you can just slide a shim in, there's no preload right there. You understand? So if you can just slide a shim in, you got something wrong. If you go to pop this out of one with a shim and you unbolt these caps and you have to use a pry bar to pry this out, that's normal. That's good. That's how you know there's preload. Make sense? So if we were to drive those hundreds in and then we're to check this, ready? And let's just say we had 30 thousandths of backlash and we want to go to between 5 and 7. 30 thousandths, what's that tell me? Here's your pinion, here's your ring gear. It's got a lot of clearance. What should I do? Tell me if it was adjusters. What would I do? Tighten this one, but what about that one? Loosen it. All that's gone with shims. There's no tighten, there's no loosen. So if I have 100 thousandths and 100 thousandths and I want to move it tighter because it's got too much clearance, I need to add shims over here and take shims out over here, okay? But you got to understand there's only one shim here and there's only one shim here. So there's no such thing as like, oh, I'm going to take some out of here and add it here. Remember how I was loosening this one and tightening this one? There's just shims. So if I have 100 and 100, what should I do? I want to move that over that way. What should I do? True, so let's just say I bust out a 110 shim. If I bust out a 110 shim and I add it there, isn't it going to tighten up the backlash? But what's it going to do to the preload? Now it's going to be too tight, right? So what should I do over here?
9.
How decrease? Yes. How much?
Like 10.
I got a 90. Makes sense? Okay. The preload would be the same. You understand? Now, if I were to go ahead and I were to check that, and let's just say now our backlash is good, but let's say for some reason I missed the preload. If the backlash is now perfect, it's 5 to 7, but my preload is too loose. Like let's say my total preload is 12, and remember we were going for like, what were we going for, 16 to 18? My preload is only 12. How could I tighten my preload without messing up my backlash?
Increase it on both sides of the pin.
Okay, so how about we go with like a 105? If I go with a 105 here, what should I do there? 95. A 95. See how that would not mess up my backlash? You guys agree with me? Right, because we added the same amount on each side, so therefore it didn't move it, it just tightened both of them up equally. Think you're understanding this? Yep. Kind of? Okay, if that's true, then you think you're all good, right? We got the right backlash, we got the right pinion preload, we got the right total preload. The question is, do you remember the first step when we pushed that bearing in on the press over there? Do you know what we were actually doing right there? We were setting the pinion depth. I don't know what our pinion depth is. Do you want to know what our pinion depth is? You want to know if this diff is ready to go? That's when we get the gear marking compound. Okay. And this is also a good way to whiten your teeth. And I probably should have put gloves on, but I'm going to sacrifice myself just for you. I need to do this in several points. See this gear compound? I'm going to paint it. Painting is fun. I'm going to do some right there. Let me get a little bit more. Why should I do it in several spots? Summarize back what I taught you already. Remember how we drew this ring gear on? What if I drew it on kind of crooked? What if it has run out? This pattern will show that, by the way. Okay, I'm gonna turn it like this. I'm doing about 4 spots. Right, and we need to get it on both sides of the tooth, by the way. Okay, so you like all this run out goop? Now the next thing is, I'm gonna turn it with this socket, but I'm not gonna turn it with that little inch-pound torque wrench. I need one more thing. This is somebody's box right here, right? Pry bar. Why do you think I need a pry bar? Who knows? We need to put a little load on this. All right, so if I'm gonna do forward, I'm actually gonna run both directions, but what I need to do while I do that is I need to put a little pry bar action on here. In fact, Daniel, jump on down here and run this a bunch of times one direction. But I'm gonna back it up to you because I'm kind of into the bench right there. Go ahead, run it. Clockwise, clockwise for 1. Run it, spin it a bunch of times. See that? I'm just loading it up a little bit. If you don't load it up, a lot of times the won't be very clear. Use 2 hands, spin it around, spin it around. Don't you tell me you're gonna get the impact gun. Roberto, go ahead. We're running the ring and the pinion together right here. Okay, then you ready? We're gonna spin it the other way. It makes it tough on the vise. See, it is nicer when it's upside down, but go ahead. Okay, keep going. We're seeing how the gears interact. If the gears are touching each other where they're supposed to touch each other, there's gonna be a good shadow on here. But if it's like hitting in the wrong place, there's gonna be like, hey, why are they hitting there? Make sense? Mostly pinion depth is what we're checking. Okay, good, I'm happy. Now, I'm gonna bring this over. Come on over, Gravy Man. We're gonna give this a little breakdown, okay? I want you to see what I see. Come right over my shoulder. You can see pretty well? Yep. You see this right here?
Yep.
This is the heel side. This is the toe side. This shadow is a little bit heel, but not horribly. Then I want to spin it and see if that's the same everywhere. It looks like it's the same up here, right? See this? It's a little bit heel. It's a little heel. If there was a lot of run out, you might get some pattern down here and some pattern up here. You'd have like high, you'd have heel, and down here you'd have toe, and up here you'd have heel and toe, right? So if this thing has run out, this is gonna change. Or it might be root, and it might be crown, right? But all these, first off, all these markings are the same, so that's a good indication we have no run out on here. Which, by the way, that's kind of silly because if you want to check run out, then check run out, right? So if it were me, that's not really how I would evaluate run out. If you want to check run out, you ready? Here's how you do that. But on the ASE, they're going to ask you to interpret some patterns, okay? So you got to know what that would look like. So if I were to do this and I were to check, you notice it's not moving. We already knew there was no run out because we checked it with the pattern, but there's a couple different ways to check it, okay? Now the next thing, so this is all on the drive side, by the way. We also need to look at the coast side, which requires looking downward a lot. And it looks like it's kind of similar. It's heel. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. All right, now you're gonna look at it from my perspective for a second. Your ring gear is right here. This is your heel side. Your toe side is way in here. Can you follow what I'm saying? So if you're riding mostly on the heel, how would you get it to ride on the toe more? We need to center it more. How would we do that? We need to move the pinion in. Remember that? So this actually, we could probably run this, but if you look, it is a little bit on the heel on those marks. Would you agree? You saw it on it's not right where we want it. It'd be great if we had this right here in the center, right? Now, as for the root and the crown, it's actually pretty good. If we were to look at these, it's actually probably a hair to the crown though, now that I'm looking at it. So that would mean we could actually tighten the backlash up a little bit, but overall that's decent. It's just a little bit heel. This is the part that gets a little tough to explain. So let me think of how I'm gonna explain this. Pause that one. All right, so we actually just yanked this differential back apart really quick because I wanna make sure you all understand very well. Remember how we're a little heel? Let me explain to you what heel is. When this pinion comes in, heel means it's kind of shallow like this. It's shallow. This is shallow. If you were to look up and down, see how this would be shallow. It's riding on the heel. How would we get it to ride more towards the toe? We'd have to increase the depth. Shallow pinion, deep pinion. This would be too deep. That would be too much toe. Out here is too much heel. So we need to actually get it a little bit deeper. You can visualize that, right? See that? Boom. Okay, but how do we do that? Now you gotta look at this. This pinion is driven up as far as it can go, but what stops it is that shim down there. Remember that shim we did right in the beginning? If that had a thicker shim, it wouldn't go up as far, so it would hang a little deeper. Make sense? So if our pinion depth is too shallow, we need it deeper like this. Ready? Like that much. You need to increase the shim size in there. So you know what we need to do? Put this back on the press, put that bearing splitter on, press this back out, take the shim, measure it with a micrometer. That's why we got the micrometer stuff out, although I don't recall where it is. Bring one over, and then we'd measure that shim, and then we might, sometimes it's a bit of an approximation, right? Because if you're looking at this heel wear, we agree that we have heel wear, right? But how much more shim depth do we need? I don't know, it's a little hard to say. So you're gonna go with some amount of thicker shim. And when you get experience and you do a lot of these, you'll be like, oh yeah, when I added 10 thousandths to that shim, it moved it like this much. And then you might approximate, maybe you need 10 thousandths thicker, maybe you need 30 thousandths thicker or whatever. So the next step that you do, like when we are measuring all these, you'd actually have to use that micrometer and be using that micrometer to measure this, that, and the other thing. All right, so now we're into these, right? We would pull the bearing, measure that shim with this micrometer, and let's just say I fake measure it real quick here, and I get, oh, that shim's 100 thousandths. What should we put in? Technician A says a 90 thousandths. Technician B says 110 thousandths. Who's correct? B, we want a thicker shim, exactly. A thicker shim will drop this deeper, which will get it to be more toe than heel. Okay? Kind of understand all that? A little bit? Let's pause it, Marty.